Welcome back. Today we are exploring system design and how WhatsApp handles 10 billion messages daily. Let us dive straight into the architecture. Imagine a system that processes over 10 billion messages every single day. That is the reality of WhatsApp. To achieve this staggering scale, the engineering team had to solve some of the hardest problems in distributed systems. You are not just building a simple web app. You are building a real-time, ultra-low latency communication network that must never go down. Even a few seconds of downtime affects hundreds of millions of users globally. In this architecture breakdown, we are going to explore exactly how WhatsApp handles this massive load. We will look at how they maintain millions of concurrent connections, how they route messages instantly, and the specific technologies they chose to make it all possible. Understanding this system gives you a masterclass in high availability backend engineering. Every design decision they made, from the programming language to the network protocols, was driven by the need for absolute reliability and speed. Let's dive into the core requirements that shaped their entire architectural strategy. Before writing a single line of code, we have to define what the system must do. First, WhatsApp requires ultra-low latency for real-time chat. When you hit send, the message needs to appear on your friend's screen instantly. Second, the system demands high availability with virtually zero downtime. People rely on it for critical communication, business, and emergencies. Third, it must handle massive concurrent connections. At any given moment, hundreds of millions of users are actively connected to the servers. Fourth, we need guaranteed message delivery. Without any data loss, even if a user's phone temporarily loses signal or dies. Finally, all of this must be achieved with a minimal server footprint. For cost efficiency, WhatsApp famously supported its first few hundred million users with only a handful of engineers and a surprisingly small number of servers. How did they do it? It starts with how the mobile app talks to the server. Let's map out the high-level architecture. It all begins with the mobile client. Your phone doesn't just send a quick request and disconnect. It establishes a persistent connection. This connection lands on a connection gateway, which acts as the front door, holding open millions of sockets simultaneously. From there, traffic is routed to a chat server. The chat server is the brain of the operation, responsible for figuring out where your message needs to go. But how does it know if your friend is online? It checks with the presence server, a dedicated service that tracks the online or offline status of every single user in real time. Finally, if the recipient is offline, the message must be stored temporarily in a database. Notice that the connection between the client and the gateway is persistent. This is a crucial departure from standard web traffic, and it requires a very specific network protocol. Why can't we just use standard HTTP for a chat app? Let's compare HTTP with WebSockets. Looking at the connection type, HTTP is stateless and relies on a request-response cycle. WebSockets, however, create a persistent, full duplex connection. This drastically affects latency. HTTP has high overhead because every single message requires a new handshake and headers. WebSockets have ultra-low latency because the connection stays open. What about receiving messages? With server push, HTTP requires the client to constantly ask or poll the server for new messages. WebSockets allow the server to push messages natively the moment they arrive. So which protocol is better for WhatsApp? It has to be WebSockets. When we look at the ideal use cases, HTTP is perfect for loading static web pages, but WebSockets are absolutely essential for real-time chat applications where speed and continuous data flow are non-negotiable. Let's look at how a client actually establishes this persistent connection. First, we initialize the connection by creating a new WebSocket object pointing to a secure server URL. Notice the WSS protocol, which stands for WebSocket Secure. Once connected, the client doesn't need to keep asking the server for updates. Instead, we simply listen for incoming messages using an event listener. Whenever the server pushes a message down the pipe, this function triggers instantly, allowing us to display the message on the screen. Finally, when you want to reply, you send a message directly through that exact same open socket. There are no new HTTP headers, no new handshakes, and no wasted time. It is a direct, open pipe between your phone and the WhatsApp servers. But holding millions of these pipes open simultaneously creates a massive engineering headache. Let's pause and test your understanding of our network protocols. Why does WhatsApp use WebSockets instead of HTTP polling? Option A: HTTP cannot send text data. Option B: WebSockets allow bidirectional server push. Option C: HTTP requires a dedicated database. Option D: WebSockets encrypt data automatically. Take a moment to think about the core difference we just discussed. The correct answer is B. WebSockets allow bidirectional server push. With HTTP polling, your phone would have to constantly ask the server if there are new messages, draining your battery and overwhelming the servers. WebSockets keep a single connection open, allowing the server to push messages to you the exact millisecond they arrive. Holding open a few WebSockets is easy. Holding open millions is incredibly difficult. In the early days of the internet, engineers faced something called the C10K problem, the challenge of optimizing network sockets to handle 10,000 concurrent connections on a single server. Traditional web servers like Apache would spawn a new operating system thread for every single user connection. Operating system threads are heavy. They consume a lot of memory and CPU context switching time. If you try to put 1 million users on a server using traditional threads, the server will quickly run out of RAM and crash completely. WhatsApp needed to handle not just 10,000, but millions of concurrent connections per server to keep their hardware costs down. To solve this monumental concurrency problem, they had to look beyond traditional programming languages like Java or C++. They needed a language built specifically for massive concurrency. To handle this massive scale, WhatsApp chose a programming language called Erlang. Erlang was originally built by Ericsson in the 1980s specifically for telecommunication switches. It was designed to route phone calls, which is conceptually identical to routing chat messages. Instead of heavy OS threads, Erlang uses lightweight user space processes. These processes are so small that a single machine can easily run millions of them simultaneously. This is exactly how WhatsApp handles millions of connections per server without crashing. Furthermore, Erlang employs a highly fault-tolerant actor model. If one process crashes, it doesn't take down the whole system. It just restarts instantly in isolation. Finally, Erlang allows hot swapping code without any downtime. Engineers can deploy updates and fix bugs while the system is actively running, ensuring the chat service never goes offline for maintenance. Let's visualize how this actor model actually works in practice. In Erlang, everything is an actor. When user A connects, they are assigned their own dedicated actor. This actor is an isolated process that only manages user A's state. When user A sends a message to user B, it doesn't directly manipulate user B's memory. Instead, it sends the data to user B's mailbox. Every actor has a private mailbox that queues incoming messages. User B's actor process then reads from this mailbox one message at a time, processing them sequentially. Because actors share absolutely no memory, there are no complex locking mechanisms or race conditions to worry about. Once processed, user B's actor sends an acknowledgement back to user A. This isolated, message passing architecture is exactly why Erlang is so incredibly stable under massive concurrent loads. WhatsApp didn't build their chat server entirely from scratch on day one. They started with an open source Erlang server called Ejabird. Ejabird is a robust, battle tested chat server used by many large organizations. It was originally built on XMPP, which stands for Extensible Messaging and Presence Protocol. XMP is the exact same protocol that powered Google Talk and early Facebook Messenger. However, XMP uses XML to format its messages. XML is very verbose and heavy. So, WhatsApp heavily customized the protocol to reduce this XML overhead. They stripped out everything unnecessary and eventually moved to a proprietary binary format. Why go through all that trouble? Because they needed a system optimized for mobile battery and bandwidth. By shrinking the payload size, messages travel faster over poor 2G networks, and the phone's radio doesn't have to stay powered on as long, saving massive amounts of battery life. Let's write out the exact step-by-step flow of a single message before we even talk about databases. First, we have the connection phase. Client A establishes a persistent WebSocket to a connection gateway. Next is the dispatch phase. The gateway receives the message and forwards the payload to the Erlang chat server. Now the server has a decision to make. It performs a presence check. It queries the presence system to see if client B is currently online and which specific gateway they are connected to. If client B is online, what is the fastest way to deliver it? Direct delivery. The chat server routes the message straight to client B's gateway, pushing it down their open WebSocket. It happens in milliseconds, entirely in memory. But what happens if client B is offline? That requires database sharding, which we will explore next. Now that we understand how connections are maintained, let's talk about storage. When you process 10 billion messages, a single database will instantly crash. This is where database sharding comes into play. Sharding simply means breaking up a massive database into smaller, more manageable pieces distributed across multiple servers. This architecture prevents any single server from becoming a bottleneck or a catastrophic point of failure. But how does the system know where your specific messages are? It uses a technique called consistent hashing, typically based on your unique user ID. This ensures that your data always routes to the exact same shard. Why does this matter? Because if your phone is offline, WhatsApp needs to store those messages temporarily. Sharding ensures incredibly fast retrieval of these offline messages the moment you reconnect. Finally, this horizontal scaling approach is what allows the system to maintain ultra-low latency, even during massive global events like New Year's Eve, when traffic spikes unpredictably. Let's visualize exactly how a message is routed to the correct database shard. Imagine an incoming message hits the backend servers. The system doesn't just guess where to put it. Instead, it passes the recipient's user ID through a mathematical hash function. This function outputs a specific value that acts like a map coordinate. If the hash value falls into the first range, the message is instantly routed to shard 1. If it falls into a different range, it goes to shard 2. And this scales out to shard n, representing thousands of database nodes. So, what happens if we add more servers to handle growth? We only need to remap a small portion of the hash ranges, not the entire database. This elegant routing mechanism ensures that no matter how many billions of users join the platform, the lookup time for any single message remains constant and lightning fast. Let's pause and test your understanding of database scaling. Here is your question. Which technique does WhatsApp use to determine which database shard stores a specific user's offline messages? Option A is round robin DNS. Option B is consistent hashing by user ID. Option C is random assignment. And option D is geographic proximity. Take a moment to think about how we just routed those messages. The correct answer is B. Consistent hashing by user ID ensures that a specific user's data is always mapped to the exact same database shard. If they used random assignment, the system would have to search every single server to find your messages, which would completely destroy performance. Geographic proximity helps with initial connection speed, but the actual database shard assignment relies on that mathematical hash to guarantee fast, predictable data retrieval at massive scale. To truly appreciate this architecture, you need to visualize the sheer scale of 10 billion messages. We are not just talking about text. We are talking about images, voice notes, and videos crossing the globe in milliseconds. Every single pulse of light represents a complex handshake between servers, a WebSocket connection being maintained, and a database shard being queried. When you send a message from Tokyo to London, it traverses multiple network hops, yet it feels instantaneous to the user. This is the magic of combining Erlang's concurrency with highly optimized database sharding. But there is a massive elephant in the room. With all this data flowing across global networks, how do we ensure that no one, not hackers, not governments, and not even WhatsApp itself, can read your private conversations? This brings us to the most critical security feature of modern messaging systems. Let's dive into how privacy is mathematically guaranteed. The answer to that privacy question is end-to-end encryption, powered by the industry standard Signal Protocol. This is a non-negotiable requirement for modern system design. In this model, the cryptographic keys used to lock and unlock your messages exist only on your physical device. They are never transmitted in plain text. Because of this, even if a rogue employee accessed the database, WhatsApp servers cannot read your message contents. They only see scrambled, unreadable ciphertext. This cryptographic barrier completely prevents man-in-the-middle attacks, where a hacker tries to intercept data as it travels across public Wi-Fi networks. Whether you are sending a simple text, a high-definition photo, or making a secure phone call, this protocol ensures absolute privacy for all communication. The server's only job is to act as a blind courier, delivering a locked box from one person to another without ever having the key to open it. Let's trace the exact journey of a secure message. When Alice wants to message Bob, her app first asks the server for Bob's public key. The server retrieves this public key and sends it back to Alice. Think of a public key like an open padlock that anyone can use. Alice's phone uses this padlock to encrypt her message, turning it into unreadable ciphertext, and sends it to the server. The server, acting merely as a router, delivers this locked ciphertext to Bob's device. Finally, Bob's phone uses his closely guarded private key, which never leaves his device, to decrypt and read the message. So, what happens if the server is compromised during delivery? Absolutely nothing. The attacker only gets the locked ciphertext, and without Bob's private key, the message remains mathematically impossible to read. This is the genius of asymmetric cryptography. To make this crystal clear, let's compare standard encryption with end-to-end encryption. First, look at data at rest. With standard encryption, the server encrypts the data, meaning the server holds the key. With end-to-end, only the user's key encrypts the data. This directly impacts server access. In a standard model, the company can read your data. In an end-to-end model, the server is completely blind to the content. Next is key storage. Standard systems store keys centrally, making them a massive target for hackers. End-to-end systems store keys strictly on your local device. Finally, consider the primary security risks. For standard encryption, a server breach is catastrophic, exposing millions of records. For end-to-end encryption, the main risk is someone physically stealing your unlocked phone. The architectural shift here is moving trust away from the central server and placing it entirely in the hands of the users. Let's verify your understanding of this critical security architecture. Here is your question. In the Signal protocol used by WhatsApp, where are the private cryptographic keys stored? Option A says on the central database shards. Option B says in the Erlang server memory. Option C says only on the user's local devices. And option D says distributed across global edge nodes. Take a few seconds to recall the encryption handshake we just mapped out. The correct answer is C. The entire foundation of end-to-end encryption relies on the fact that private keys never leave the user's physical device. If they were stored in the database, in server memory, or on edge nodes, a compromised server would allow attackers to decrypt the messages. By keeping the private keys exclusively on your phone, the system guarantees that the server remains a completely blind courier, ensuring absolute privacy. Let's lock in everything we have covered about massive system design with a quick active recall session. First, the programming language WhatsApp uses for massive concurrency is what? It is Erlang designed specifically for highly concurrent telecom systems. Next, database scaling and routing are achieved through consistent what? Hashing. Consistent hashing ensures users always connect to the correct database shard without searching the entire network. Finally, end-to-end encryption ensures that servers only ever see unreadable what? Ciphertext. Because the private keys stay strictly on your device, the server never sees plain text. Mastering these core concepts, Erlang's lightweight processes, persistent WebSocket connections, horizontal database sharding, and the Signal protocol gives you the exact blueprint for building applications that can scale to billions of users without collapsing under the load. Visit Examiverse AI Studio platform to automate your training modules. Thank you for watching. Keep designing scalable systems, and I will see you in the next lesson. Happy learning!